The inherent bond between a parent and their child is universally recognized as sacred and inviolable. However, when this fundamental connection is tragically severed by the heinous actions of a predator, some parents, consumed by grief and rage, embark on a path of retribution, seeking vengeance for the unimaginable suffering inflicted upon their children. In this in-depth report, we will delve into the chilling and often disturbing narratives behind these acts of parental vengeance. Exploring the complex psychological factors that drive individuals to such extremes, we will examine 10 of the most extreme and unsettling cases of vigilante justice carried out by parents against those they believe responsible for harming their children. Acts that have been described as monstrous executions.
41-year-old Jay Maynor is charged with the shooting death of 59-year-old Raymond Earl Brooks. The family says that Brooks was sexually abusing Maynor's daughter.
June 8, 2014, became a pivotal moment for Jay Maynor, an Alabama father, forever altering the course of his life. After enduring 12 agonizing years of simmering frustration and unyielding anger, Maynor made the difficult decision to bypass the traditional legal system and pursue his own form of justice. His target: the individual who had committed the heinous act of molesting his young daughter. However, a crucial question arises. Why did Maynor wait over a decade to take action? To fully grasp the complexities of this case, we must delve back into the past, specifically to the year 2002. That was the year Jay's life was irrevocably shattered, marking a turning point from which he would never fully recover. His daughter, Julia, suffered the unimaginable trauma of being sexually abused by Raymond Earl Brooks, a man who held a position of trust within the family as her adopted grandfather. When confronted with the accusations, Brooks admitted to his guilt, but in a shocking miscarriage of justice, he received a mere 18-month prison sentence. It's difficult to comprehend how such a short sentence could be deemed adequate for a crime that had such a devastating and lasting impact on Julia's life. The question remains: how could any reasonable person accept such a lenient punishment? As one might expect, Jay was consumed by a burning rage, fueled by a sense of injustice. However, for the sake of his daughter's well-being, he attempted to suppress his anger and move forward. Tragically, Julia was unable to find the same solace and was unable to escape the lingering effects of the abuse. However, beneath the surface, she grappled with the debilitating effects of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And the pain from the abuse lingered, refusing to abate. Brooks's lenient sentence only served to exacerbate her suffering. Adding insult to injury, it served as a constant and agonizing reminder of the injustice she had been forced to endure. On June 8, 2014, chaos erupted, marking a critical turning point in the narrative. A statement made by Julia to her father proved to be the tipping point, pushing him beyond the brink of control. He had witnessed his daughter's suffering for an extended period, enduring years of anguish and helplessness. The cumulative weight of her pain ultimately became unbearable, leading to a devastating breaking point. Jay armed himself with a firearm and embarked on a mission fueled by a singular objective: to terminate Brooks' life. However, his course was altered by an unexpected detour. Jay discharged his weapon at an individual observed near the Berlin Plaza quick stop, later identified as his stepdaughter's former romantic partner. Now, details regarding the stepdaughter are being withheld to protect her privacy in this sensitive matter. The stepdaughter had recently concluded her relationship with the aforementioned individual prior to this incident unfolding. Allegations of abusive behavior directed towards her by her former partner had surfaced. And although the ex-boyfriend successfully sought shelter within the confines of the building and emerged unscathed, Jay Maynor still faced charges of attempted murder for his actions. Yet, Jay's actions did not cease at this juncture. Following the altercation with the former boyfriend, he proceeded to Brooks's residence and fatally shot him at his doorstep, claiming his life. The crucial question remains: what specific words uttered by Julia triggered such an extreme reaction from her father? The full truth behind the incident may forever remain shrouded in mystery. But in the immediate aftermath of the shooting, Jay was apprehended by law enforcement without incident and subsequently confessed to the entirety of the crime. He ultimately entered into a plea agreement with prosecutors, accepting a sentence of 40 years of incarceration. The sentence was divided into 2 consecutive 20-year terms, one for the murder of Brooks and the other for the attempted murder. The district attorney, in a statement defending the sentencing decision, asserted that, irrespective of the emotional responses stemming from the events that transpired 12 years prior, legal proceedings must be based on factual evidence. We cannot and do not prosecute cases based solely on emotional considerations. The DA stated emphatically, "Our duty is to prosecute and strive to uphold the criminal statutes of the state of Alabama to the fullest extent of our capabilities." And that is precisely what we did in this particular case. However, Julia dissented from the district attorney's perspective, firmly believing that her father's actions were motivated by a desire to protect her. She stated, "He accepted the plea agreement so that I would not have to endure the trauma of reliving the incident and be subjected to the intense scrutiny of testifying before a large audience in court. My father was acting in a protective manner, as any father should in such circumstances."
For the first time in my life, I do not feel scared. For the first time in my life, I do not wake up feeling fear.
Was Jim Minor a true citizen crime fighter, a vigilante hero, or was he simply another individual operating outside the boundaries of the law? We present the facts and leave the ultimate determination to you, the viewer. Rewind to 1995. A courtroom delivered an unequivocal warning. A crystal-clear mandate. Former law enforcement officer, Robert Selman, was explicitly instructed by the court to maintain a distance from Officer Jill Bender, to cease all contact. The consequences of violating this order were severe. Selman faced potential incarceration, jail time for harassment should he disregard the court's mandate. However, Jill's father, Paul Bender, a man deeply concerned for his daughter's well-being, remained unconvinced that the court order provided sufficient protection. He arrived at a difficult decision: to personally intervene, taking matters into his own hands. Bypassing official channels, Paul Bender possessed a deep understanding of the legal system, having once served within its ranks. As a former member of Brooklyn's esteemed police force, one of New York's finest, he had established a powerful precedent, a strong example of community service for his children to emulate, and his children, inspired by his dedication, followed in his footsteps, choosing careers dedicated to protecting and serving the community. Despite acknowledging Jill's capabilities as a law enforcement officer, her ability to defend herself, Paul harbored a persistent unease, a nagging feeling that something was amiss. That danger lurked. It wasn't long before Jill confided in her father, revealing the source of her distress. Robert Selman, a colleague within the police department, a fellow officer, had subjected her to unwanted attention, was actively stalking her. Selman had cultivated a deeply unsettling fixation on Jill, an obsession that spiraled out of control. This disturbing behavior began after they worked together, a professional association that Selman twisted into something sinister. Despite Jill's clear disinterest, Selman relentlessly pursued Jill, refusing to accept her rejection, bombarding her with incessant phone calls. His harassment continued unabated. Selman's unsettling behavior escalated as he lingered around Jill's residence, even resorting to peering through her windows, creating an atmosphere of intimidation. Reaching her breaking point, Jill took action by filing a formal complaint alleging harassment against Selman. Law enforcement authorities responded by apprehending Selman, taking him into custody. However, he was soon released, with a judicial order mandating that he maintain a specified distance from Jill, a common condition in such cases. Not long after this incident, Selman was involved in a serious motor vehicle collision, resulting in significant physical injuries. The accident left him with debilitating injuries, requiring an extended period of recovery. Upon his physical recovery, Selman's refusal to resume his employment led to his termination. He was subsequently discharged from his position, leaving him without a job and facing an uncertain future. A consequence of his actions, finding himself in dire straits, Selman reverted to familiar patterns of behavior. He resumed his harassment of Jill, intensifying his actions to a disturbing degree. Witnessing the escalating situation, Paul Bender decided to intervene, feeling compelled to take action. In a final attempt to de-escalate the conflict, Bender sought a rational dialogue with Selman. He visited Selman's apartment in hopes of resolving the matter peacefully and definitively. However, the encounter took a tragic turn, culminating in an exchange of gunfire within the confines of the apartment. Paul Bender discharged his firearm 6 times, striking Selman. Upon arriving at the scene, law enforcement officers discovered Selman deceased. A short distance from the apartment, the lifeless body of Paul Bender was also found. A subsequent medical examination determined that Bender had succumbed to a sudden and fatal cardiac arrest. This tragic event marked a devastating end to Paul Bender's life. Paul Bender was widely recognized for his remarkably calm demeanor and an unwavering, steadfast commitment to the pursuit of justice. However, in a tragic turn of events, the immense psychological burden of taking matters into his own hands, circumventing the established legal system, ultimately proved to be an insurmountable weight for him to carry. The date was October 7, 2003, a day etched in memory, when Kimberly Cunningham was tragically confronted with a devastating revelation. Her daughter had endured the horrific trauma of sexual assault at the hands of her own uncle, identified as Coy Hunley, nearly 5 agonizing years prior. The events that unfolded in the wake of this discovery would irrevocably alter the course of their lives. Fueled by a mother's protective instincts, Kimberly got into her vehicle that very day, and proceeded directly to the tool company where Hunley was employed. Seeking a confrontation, she confronted him in the parking lot, outside the confines of the workplace. desperately seeking any indication of remorse or contrition for his heinous actions. Instead of expressing remorse, he met her pleas with derisive laughter, further fueling her anguish. Overcome with a sense of righteous anger, Kimberly drew her firearm and discharged it 5 times, striking Hunley. With unwavering resolve, she then methodically reloaded the weapon and fired an additional 5 rounds, ensuring, in her mind, that he would never again pose a threat to innocent individuals. Eyewitnesses to the harrowing scene described Kimberly as exhibiting an unsettlingly calm composure throughout the ordeal. Following the shooting, she calmly returned to her vehicle and departed the scene without further incident. A mere 45 minutes later, Kimberly entered the Alcova establishment. The Tennessee Police Department became the focal point of the case when Kimberly voluntarily surrendered herself to authorities in August of 2003. Turning herself in just 2 months prior to this event, Kimberly had commenced preparations for a potentially dire situation by legally acquiring a permit to carry a firearm, taking the first step towards armed self-defense. She subsequently honed her skills at a firing range, practicing her marksmanship, and ultimately began carrying a loaded firearm in her purse. Indicative of a heightened sense of insecurity, this series of actions was precipitated by a distinct and unsettling incident, in which she recently uncovered disturbing information, alleging that Hunley's eldest son had engaged in inappropriate behavior towards her own son, Shane, a claim of molestation. Upon reporting these allegations to law enforcement officials, she received threats from Hunley, leaving her feeling enraged and vulnerable due to his intimidation. In a moment of retaliatory anger, she resorted to vandalism, shattering the windows of Hunley's son's vehicle. Hunley subsequently informed her that the act of vandalism had further escalated the tension between them, intensifying the conflict. However, the period of calm was fleeting as an unsettling quiet descended. Kimberly's daughter, Amanda, was grappling with her own internal struggles, silently enduring hardship. Once a high-achieving student, Amanda had become increasingly withdrawn, exhibiting signs of emotional distress. Her nights were marked by episodes of crying and screaming outside her mother's bedroom door, displaying significant emotional turmoil, persisting until she was granted permission to seek solace by sleeping with her mother. Kimberly instinctively recognized that something was profoundly amiss, sensing a deep-seated problem plaguing her daughter, and persistently questioned Amanda, seeking answers to her troubling observations. However, the young girl found herself unable to articulate the horrific experiences she had endured. But then, one fateful night, Amanda's suppressed emotions finally overwhelmed her, leading to a breakthrough. She summoned her mother to her room, seeking comfort and support. In a moment of intense vulnerability, Amanda disclosed the horrifying truth about the abuse inflicted upon her by her uncle. She revealed that Coy Hunley had been subjecting her to prolonged and systematic abuse, a revelation that sent shockwaves through the family. That morning, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place for Kimberly, as she finally grasped the full extent of the horrific situation. By the time Amanda departed for school that day, a tragic event had unfolded. Hunley was found lifeless in a parking lot, a victim of a fatal shooting. The coroner's report indicated 5 bullet wounds to the head and 5 more distributed across his body. In October 2005, Kimberly faced a jury of her peers and was ultimately acquitted of second-degree murder charges. However, she was found guilty of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter. The jury handed down a sentence of 4 years imprisonment. This sentence was later reduced to 6 months following a successful appeal.
This is 32-year-old Sarah Sands. In a few moments' time, she will stab a man to death with a knife that she is carrying underneath her clothing.
On November 28, 2014, Sarah Sands armed herself with a knife, a chilling prelude to the events that would unfold. Sands proceeded directly to her neighbor's residence in Canning Town, East London, her intentions shrouded in mystery. Under the cover of darkness, she inflicted 8 stab wounds upon her neighbor, a shocking act of violence that left the community reeling. What could possibly compel a mother to engage in such extreme and brutal behavior? What underlying factors could have driven her to this point?
I had taken the law into my own hands. I had done that.
Michael argued vehemently that the man she had killed was not merely a friendly neighbor, as some might have believed. This individual, she asserted, harbored a disturbing and hidden past. Court records revealed a staggering 24 prior convictions for 2 distinct offenses, spanning a period of 3 decades, painting a picture of a long history of criminal behavior. Despite having served time in prison for these previous crimes, he remained free to walk the streets. And even more alarmingly, Sarah had recently received devastating news. Plysted had been reportedly abusing her young son. Initially, Sarah had absolutely no reason to suspect any wrongdoing on Plysted's part. Plysted was a well-known figure in the neighborhood, an elderly neighbor whom she believed to be incapable of harming anyone. She even went so far as to prepare meals for him on occasion. Demonstrating a sense of trust and neighborly kindness, he had offered Sarah's son a part-time job in his brick lane and repair shop. And Sarah initially saw absolutely no harm in this seemingly generous offer. However, everything changed dramatically when law enforcement officers arrived at her doorstep, informing her that Pleisted had been formally accused of molesting 2 young boys. He was currently out on bail, awaiting trial for these serious charges, adding to the growing concern. A third allegation of molestation was also under active investigation by authorities. Sarah's horror intensified and grew exponentially when she uncovered the shocking truth that Pleisted had legally changed his name from Robin Malt. In a deliberate attempt to conceal his extensive history, following his release from incarceration, he became a prominent figure within the local community, operating his business as if his past transgressions had never occurred, seemingly unaffected by the gravity of his actions, harboring deep concerns for the safety and well-being of her own son. Sarah directly confronted him, pointedly inquiring if he had harmed her child in any way. Initially, he offered a denial, refuting any involvement in wrongdoing. However, Sarah persisted in her questioning, repeatedly pressing him for the truth, until his facade of innocence finally crumbled under the weight of her relentless interrogation. He ultimately succumbed to the pressure and confessed to being manipulated and subjected to abuse. The admission painted a grim picture of his past experiences. Completely devastated and reeling from this shocking disclosure, Sarah confronted the perpetrator and delivered a powerful plea during his trial proceedings. Through tears, she recounted the events of that fateful night, detailing her visit to his apartment, after consuming a significant quantity of alcohol, a full bottle of brandy, fueled by a desperate hope that he would finally acknowledge his guilt, and thereby spare his victims the agonizing ordeal of confronting him in a court of law. Instead of exhibiting remorse, however, he responded with a dismissive smirk, displaying a shocking lack of empathy. He brazenly denounced her sons as liars, further exacerbating the already tense situation. This proved to be the catalyst that pushed Sarah beyond her limits. Consumed by an overwhelming surge of rage, Sarah reacted violently, inflicting 8 stab wounds upon him. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, she promptly surrendered herself to law enforcement authorities. She was subsequently convicted on a charge of manslaughter. The court recognized that her actions were the result of a momentary lapse in judgment driven by extreme emotional distress, and was initially sentenced to 3.5 years of incarceration. However, in a subsequent development, the sentence was significantly increased to 7.5 years, after the appellate court deemed the original sentence unduly lenient and insufficient for the gravity of the crime.
The offender, having fatally stabbed the deceased, did nothing to assist him, in that she did not call the emergency services.
In the year 2018, Sarah regained her freedom after enduring a period of incarceration lasting nearly 4 years. Now a staunch advocate for justice, she actively campaigns to strengthen legislation targeting offenders, particularly those who attempt to conceal their past by changing their names. Reflecting on the events that led to her imprisonment, Sarah stated unequivocally, "My actions were those of any mother who would fiercely protect her child from harm. For he inflicted unspeakable suffering upon my son," she confessed with a heavy heart. "I never envisioned myself capable of such actions, and while I derive no pride from what I did, I find solace in the certainty that he can no longer inflict harm upon others."
A Texas father who beat to death a man who tried molesting his daughter will not be charged.
In the quiet, rural landscape of Shinner, Texas, on June 9, 2012, a seemingly ordinary day on a ranch was about to take a horrifying and unexpected turn for the worse. As the adults on the property were preoccupied with the routine task of shoeing a horse, 2 young children, a girl and her brother, innocently went to tend to the chickens in the co-op. Unbeknownst to them, a dangerous predator, a man harboring sinister intentions, lurked nearby, observing their every move. Jesus Mora Flores, a 47-year-old farmhand, seized upon this vulnerable moment. Exploiting the children's isolation, he forcibly abducted the young girl, dragging her against her will to a secluded shack hidden on the vast property. Inside the confines of the shack, Flores harbored unspeakable plans, intending to commit an act of unimaginable depravity. However, the young boy, sensing the imminent danger and his sister's distress, immediately ran to seek help, alerting the adults to the unfolding crisis. The children's father, a 23-year-old man whose identity remains undisclosed to protect his privacy, was spurred into action by his daughter's desperate cries. Racing towards the shack with a primal urgency, upon entering the shack, the father was confronted with a horrifying scene, a nightmare no parent should ever endure. He discovered Flores and his daughter, both partially undressed, a clear indication of the perpetrator's heinous intentions. Overwhelmed by a surge of protective rage, the father violently intervened, tearing Flores away from his daughter and subjecting him to a brutal beating. He focused his attack on Flora's head, delivering blow after blow until Flores lay unconscious, his body rendered inert. In the aftermath of the violent confrontation, the father immediately contacted emergency services, dialing 911. While on the phone with the dispatcher, he openly confessed to the assault, admitting he had beaten the man who had attempted to harm his daughter, and desperately pleaded with the 911 operator to dispatch emergency services before it was too late. Emphasizing the urgency of the situation, the operator responded with a simple, "Okay." In a later interview, the father recounted the harrowing experience, stating, "My daughter and I fought back against him, but I'm not sure. But by then, it was already too late." He added, his voice filled with remorse, "By the time law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, Flores had tragically succumbed to the injuries he sustained during the altercation." The father was subsequently taken into police custody. However, it wasn't long before the local community rallied behind him, offering their unwavering support. During the ensuing court proceedings, the defense team emphatically argued that the father had never harbored any intention of taking Flores' life. His actions, they asserted, were purely instinctive, driven by the primal urge to protect his child from harm. Multiple eyewitnesses corroborated the father's account of the events, testifying that they had observed Flores leading the young girl toward the secluded area where the incident unfolded. The Lavaca County grand jury ultimately sided with the father's actions, declining to indict him on any criminal charges. The grand jury concluded that his use of lethal force was justified given the circumstances of the situation. In the end, the tight-knit community in Texas continued to support the father, demonstrating a deep understanding of the lengths a parent will go to in order to safeguard their child's well-being.
Si lo que quieren es destruirnos, ellos están disfrutando, que disfruten. Pero con el tiempo, ellos terminarán con mi madre.
On June 13, 2005, in the town of Benejuzar, Spain, Maria del Carmen Garcia was waiting at a local bus stop when a chilling encounter unfolded before her. She unexpectedly came face to face with the very man who had subjected her daughter to a horrific assault years prior. Adding insult to injury, the perpetrator, in a display of brazen disregard for her pain, had the audacity to approach Maria and inquire, with a seemingly mocking tone, "How is your daughter doing?" That seemingly innocuous question ignited a firestorm of emotions within Maria, stirring deep-seated anger and anguish. Overwhelmed by the sheer audacity of the encounter, Maria was left speechless in that moment. However, under the cover of nightfall, she resolved to take decisive action, making a decision that would send shockwaves through the entire community. Rewind to October 17, 1998. Maria's daughter, Veronica, a young woman at the time, was on a simple errand to purchase bread. Tragically, her path crossed with their neighbor, Antonio Cosme, who appeared seemingly out of nowhere. He violently seized Veronica, brandishing a knife and holding it menacingly to her throat. He then forcibly dragged her into a secluded wooded area, where he committed a brutal assault. 2 years following the horrific crime, Cosme was convicted and sentenced to 9 years in prison for his heinous actions. On the fateful day he encountered Maria at the bus stop, he was out on a temporary prison leave, seeking to indulge in alcoholic beverages. Cosme's intention was to socialize with companions and return to the correctional facility later that evening. However, fate intervened, and he never reached his destination. As Cosme made his way to the establishment, Maria harbored different intentions. She proceeded directly to her residence, where she quickly acquired a disposable plastic container and a means of ignition. Her subsequent action involved a brief stop at a local petrol station to procure flammable liquid. Filling the container, Maria's next destination was the very same drinking establishment where Cosme was presently located. Inside the bustling bar, Cosme was engaged in conversation and consuming beverages when Maria entered the premises. The proprietor of the establishment, sensing a disturbance, attempted to intervene and prevent Maria's advance. However, she dismissed his concerns, asserting her desire for a simple verbal exchange. Then, without prior indication, Maria brandished the concealed container. She proceeded to douse Cosme with the flammable liquid and emitted a scream, uttering a phrase indicating a desire for remembrance before igniting and propelling a matchstick towards him. Within a matter of mere seconds, an intense blaze rapidly enveloped his physique, captivating onlookers in a state of stunned astonishment. Maria hastily departed from the location of the incident. Cosme was promptly transported to a medical facility, but the extent of his burns, encompassing 60% of his body's surface area, proved insurmountable. 1 week later, he succumbed to the injuries sustained during the attack. Law enforcement apprehended Maria on the same evening. By the year 2010, the judicial system of the province handed down a sentence of 9.5 years of incarceration. Certain individuals might perceive her as a perpetrator of homicide who resorted to excessive measures. While some lauded her courageous actions, others hailed her as a true hero, a mother who fearlessly defended herself and others against an imminent threat.
Why did the women of Nagpur feel the need to kill?
August 2004, Kasturba Nagar, India. In an unprecedented demonstration of collective fury, a formidable force of hundreds of women mobilized, embarking on a march from the impoverished slums to the local courthouse, their destination the trial of the notorious Akku Yadav. Yadav, a hardened criminal with a reputation for brutality, was a known gangster and accused serial killer, entering the courtroom with a characteristic swagger. Exuding an air of arrogance and defiance, he appeared utterly confident and demonstrably devoid of remorse, seemingly untouchable. However, on this day, Yadav's reign of terror would meet a decisive and violent end. He would not leave the courthouse alive. In a dramatic and shocking turn of events, defying expectations, Akku Yadav was violently attacked and lynched by an enraged mob consisting of approximately 200 women. The women, fueled by years of pent-up anger and a thirst for retribution, stabbed Yadav repeatedly, inflicting at least 70 wounds. Their fury, however, was not satiated. The brutal attack continued unabated. In a frenzy of rage, the mob hurled chili powder and stones at the incapacitated Yadav, further expressing their unbridled wrath. Among these women, a key figure in the vengeful mob was Anjana Bai Borkar, a grieving mother who had tragically lost her own child to Yadav's brutality.
The day he died, we had a really good feast. We all were very happy.
For years, Yadav held the residents of Kasturba Nagar in a grip of terror, instilling such profound fear within the community that children ceased attending school out of concern for their safety, and women remained confined to their homes, afraid to venture outside. Among the courageous individuals who dared to challenge Yadav's reign of terror was Asha, a woman who steadfastly refused to allow Yadav's reign of terror to continue unopposed. Her open defiance of Yadav's authority painted a target on her back, making her a prime subject for his wrath. Despite her mother's urgent pleas to avoid any confrontation with the dangerous Yadav, Asha boldly proclaimed, "If fate decrees that I die at his hands, then so be it. But what becomes of the countless people he continues to rob and exploit? And the women he subjects to unspeakable acts of violence and assault? Can we not stand together, united in purpose, to put an end to his tyranny?" True to her unwavering convictions, Asha made a daring attempt to end Yadav's life, but her efforts ultimately proved unsuccessful. This act of defiance only served to further inflame Yadav's thirst for vengeance against Asha. On June 8, 1999, Yadav unleashed his fury upon Asha, subjecting her to a brutal and savage assault. He then proceeded to mercilessly murder and dismember her body, committing this horrific act in the presence of Asha's young daughter, Megha. Traumatized and left utterly alone, young Megha sought refuge and protection with her grandmother, Anjanbai. But Yadav's reign of terror was far from over. One day, he would forcefully intrude upon their home, accompanied by a group of 5 men, intent on continuing his reign of terror. In a swift attempt to protect Megha, Anjanbai quickly concealed her behind a large drum, hoping to shield her from harm. However, Yadav's instincts proved to be remarkably sharp. He was not easily fooled. He observed that an additional lunch was being prepared, a detail that aroused his suspicion. He aggressively demanded to know for whom the extra meal was intended, while issuing menacing threats that the ordeal was far from concluded and that repercussions would follow. From this pivotal moment forward, a palpable sense of fear became an omnipresent companion for their family. Casting a shadow over their lives, Yadav made frequent, unwelcome visits to their residence, issuing chilling warnings to Megha that any attempt to testify against him in court would result in her demise. Despite valiant attempts to summon the courage to appear in court and face her tormentor, Megha remained profoundly traumatized and unable to articulate her experiences, silenced by the horrors she had endured. This ultimately resulted in Yadav receiving a lenient sentence of a mere 16 months. A shockingly inadequate punishment for his heinous crimes. The light sentence was a direct consequence of the absence of eyewitness testimony, highlighting the crucial role that witnesses play in securing justice. In an alarmingly short period, Yadav was back on the streets, resuming his reign of terror and wreaking havoc upon the community.
You know what would happen in the court cases against Akku? All the witnesses would accompany him there, and we knew the verdict in advance.
The year 2004 would mark a significant turning point in the fight against Yadav, as a growing number of women found the courage to rise up and challenge his oppressive reign. This wave of defiance ignited after a chilling incident in which Yadav attempted to forcibly enter the residence of Usha Narayaneni, having received information that she had assisted another woman in filing a legal case against him. In a dramatic confrontation that ensued, Usha bravely seized a cooking gas cylinder, proceeded to open its valve, releasing the flammable gas, and issued a bold threat to immolate herself and anyone in close proximity. Faced with this unexpected and potentially deadly resistance, Yadav and his accomplices hastily retreated. This pivotal incident proved to be a catalyst for change, emboldening the residents of Kasturba Nagar, and instilling in them the necessary courage to finally confront and challenge Yadav's authority. Usha took the initiative to go door to door throughout the community, rallying support and urging everyone to unite their efforts to bring down Yadav and his criminal enterprise. Her passionate pleas resonated with the people, and they finally heeded her call to action. Residents demonstrated their commitment by leaving their jobs, pooling their financial resources, and displaying unwavering determination to dismantle Yadav's power structure. In a remarkably short period, the streets became filled with throngs of angry protesters armed with rudimentary weapons like sticks and stones. The women who had previously endured Yadav's assaults marched defiantly through the slums, celebrating their newfound sense of empowerment and solidarity. In a shocking display of violence, the mob descended upon Yadav's residence, setting it ablaze in a fiery act of retribution. Overwhelmed by panic and fear, Yadav ironically sought refuge and protection from law enforcement authorities. In a surprising turn of events, the police ultimately took Yadav into custody, ostensibly for his own safety and well-being amidst the escalating chaos.
Then on 7th August, Akku surrendered. This was his planned strategy with the police. It was his tactic.
On August 13, 2004, a date etched in history, Akku Yadav was summoned to appear before the court. The women who had endured years of relentless oppression under his tyrannical rule stood poised on this pivotal day, ready to witness the long-awaited arrival of justice. A formidable force of approximately 200 women, armed with knives, stones, and shards of broken glass, descended upon the courthouse, storming its doors in a dramatic display of collective fury. Upon catching sight of the assembled women within the courtroom, Yadav responded with derision, laughing and taunting them in a blatant show of disrespect. However, his laughter quickly subsided, as this unified front of women surged towards him with unwavering determination. Their relentless pursuit continued until they were unequivocally certain that he was permanently eliminated. In the ensuing chaos, 4 women, one of whom was expecting a child, were apprehended by authorities. This act of detainment ignited a massive demonstration outside the confines of the police station, with hundreds of women vehemently demanding the immediate release of their compatriots. Eventually, law enforcement officials yielded to the mounting pressure but presented an unexpected proposition. Surrender to us any 5 elderly women. Among those who voluntarily surrendered was Anshahi Borkar, one of the women who had directly participated in the stabbing of Yadav. She firmly believed that the mothers, asserting that the perpetrators themselves, not their innocent daughters, should bear the full responsibility and face the repercussions for their actions.
This case became very popular across India and the world, in fact, and now everyone is eager to know about the verdict that the court will give today.
By the year 2014, the legal proceedings against Anshabai and the other defendants had been formally dismissed, as a direct result of the lack of sufficient evidence to secure a conviction. This dismissal left in its wake a complex and multifaceted aftermath, raising profound questions about the pursuit of justice and the intricate dynamics of retribution.
This is a historic day for women. Their unity, their struggle, and their freedom. It's an important day to celebrate.
Do you regret killing Jeff Doucette?
No.
No. Would you do it again?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
At the bustling airport, March 16, 1984, initially unfolded like any other ordinary day, with travelers going about their routines. However, this seemingly typical day was destined to become etched in memory, forever unforgettable. As passengers bustled through the airport terminal, oblivious to the impending drama, Gary Pluchet concealed himself, hiding behind the anonymity of a baseball cap and sunglasses, with his heart pounding like a drum against his ribs. Anxiety coursing through him, he nervously and repeatedly checked the firearm concealed in his pocket. Pluchet was lying in wait, filled with anticipation and dread, for the individual who he believed had utterly destroyed his life. As law enforcement officers finally escorted Jeff Dowse into Pluchet's line of sight, Gary seized the opportunity. Recognizing that this was his moment to act, he swiftly drew his weapon, firing a shot at Dowse's head. The shocking incident unfolded rapidly. The entire sequence of events, captured by surveillance cameras, provided undeniable visual evidence of the crime. The shocking airport shooting instantly dominated news headlines across the nation, igniting a fiery public discourse and raising profound questions about the true essence of justice and the complexities of revenge. Just weeks prior, on February 19, a devastating series of events unfolded. Gary's world was irrevocably shattered, leaving him grappling with unimaginable grief and anguish. His son, Jody, had just completed a karate class when Dozier, the instructor entrusted with his care, offered the young boy a seemingly harmless ride home, a gesture that would soon take a sinister turn. Jody then contacted his mother, June, seeking permission for the ride. June, placing her trust in the respected karate instructor, Ducey, readily agreed, unaware of the impending danger. After all, Ducey was a highly regarded member of their tight-knit community, a pillar of trust and authority. However, unbeknownst to everyone, this seemingly ordinary ride would soon descend into a horrifying nightmare. Instead of taking Jody directly home as promised, Dassault detoured to a bus station, initiating a terrifying ordeal for the unsuspecting Jody. Their journey ultimately led them to a dilapidated, rundown motel in the vicinity of Disneyland, a stark contrast to the promised safety of home. It was at this desolate location that Dassault perpetrated a heinous act, brutally assaulting Jody, the very child he had sworn to protect and guide. Despite the immense fear that gripped him, Jody managed to seize a moment of opportunity and make a desperate phone call to his parents. That pivotal call ultimately led to Jody's rescue and the swift apprehension of Ducey by law enforcement. However, for Gary, the emotional scars remained, and the anger refused to subside. He sought solace in the bottom of a glass, spending his days drinking at a local bar, wrestling with the profound injustice of the situation and the pain of his son's ordeal. Consumed by a desire for answers and accountability, he yearned to know when Ducey would be extradited back to Louisiana to face justice. As he awaited trial, a stroke of pure luck intervened. A former colleague from WBRZ News, in a fortunate turn of events, provided crucial information. Ducey was scheduled to arrive at the Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport at precisely 9:08 a.m. the following day. Fueled by a thirst for vengeance, Gary meticulously crafted his plan. Concealing his identity with a baseball cap and sunglasses, he seamlessly blended into the throng of people awaiting Ducey's arrival at the gate. As Ducey proceeded through the terminal, oblivious to the danger lurking nearby, he remained completely unaware of the imminent threat that awaited him. Gary suddenly brandished his handgun and fired a shot, shattering the tranquility of the airport. Ducey collapsed to the ground, and pandemonium erupted as a nearby police officer, who happened to be a personal acquaintance of Gary's, swiftly tackled him and placed him in handcuffs. Amidst the ensuing chaos and confusion, the officer exclaimed in disbelief, "Gary, why? What motivated you to do this?" With tears streaming down his face, Gary responded with a poignant question. "If someone had inflicted this pain upon your loved ones, what course of action would you have taken?" Gary ultimately faced the repercussions of his actions in a court of law. He received a 7-year suspended prison sentence, along with 5 years of probation and 300 hours of mandatory community service. Despite the gravity of his actions, he remarkably evaded incarceration, never spending a single day behind bars. His case continues to ignite passionate and often contentious discourse surrounding the concepts of justice, accountability, and the appropriate application of the law, and the controversial practice of vigilantism, raising complex questions about the boundaries of citizen action. However, his story is far from isolated. He is not alone in this complex legal landscape.
Your mom had walked in and had shot the man who'd been hurting your brother. How did you feel about that?
I wanted him dead so he couldn't hurt my brother anymore.
On April 2, 1993, the seemingly ordinary courtroom proceedings in Jamestown, California, were shattered, transforming into a scene of unspeakable horror that would forever be etched into the town's history. Ellie Nessler stood face to face with the accused, Daniel Mark Driver, a man employed at a Christian camp, facing charges for the heinous crime of murdering her beloved son. Willie, overcome by a wave of unfathomable grief and desperation, driven to the brink, Ellie Nessler produced a firearm and unleashed a volley of bullets, striking Driver multiple times in the head and neck region. But the central question remained: who was Ellie Nessler, and what chain of events culminated in this tragic courtroom shooting? Ellie Nessler's story began amidst hardship, growing up in an impoverished family in the rural landscapes of Jamestown, where she bore the responsibility of being the eldest of 3 daughters. From a tender age, Ellie was no stranger to hard work, demonstrating a tireless work ethic by operating tractors for local ranchers and acquiring the valuable skill of automotive repair. Following a series of unsuccessful marriages that ended in heartache, she eventually found love and companionship with Bill Nessler, whose livelihood was derived from gold mining and crop dusting. Together, they welcomed their son Willie into the world and embarked on a journey to seek their fortune in the distant land of Liberia, a nation then experiencing a gold rush, brimming with the promise of prosperity. However, their dreams were shattered when the ravages of civil war erupted, forcing Ellie to return to her hometown with her children in tow, where she confronted the harsh realities of a challenging life, marked by relentless financial struggles and an ongoing battle for survival, subsisting on government assistance and the meager income from chopping firewood. Their financial situation was precarious. However, circumstances would take a sinister and disturbing turn. Family members observed a marked change in Willie's demeanor and behavior following his return from a summer camp experience. During a sleepover with friends, the young boy finally disclosed that Driver had subjected him to unspeakable acts of abuse. In 1998, Driver was apprehended in Palo Alto, California, on charges of theft. He was subsequently extradited back to Tulare County to confront more serious allegations, implicating him in the abuse of Willie and 3 other young boys. The ensuing trial brought to light disturbing revelations, establishing that Driver had previously entered a guilty plea for similar offenses in the San Jose region, but had only received probation as a consequence, due in part to character testimony provided on his behalf by members of his church. By the year 1994, Ellie could no longer bear the prospect of subjecting her son to the further emotional distress of providing courtroom testimony, driven by a potent combination of a mother's protective instincts, a desire for justice, and a thirst for revenge. She arrived at a critical and life-altering decision. Ellie resolved to permanently eliminate the threat posed by Daniel Driver. To achieve this, she clandestinely brought a .25 caliber pistol into the courthouse and fired 5 shots at Driver, ending his life. During a sit-down interview, Nessler expressed a complex array of emotions regarding the shooting incident, stating, "I am deeply remorseful for taking a human life and for the separation from my children that I now endure. But, on the other hand, I harbor a wish that the judicial system would have effectively intervened and addressed the situation in a way that would have prevented my actions. I deeply regret that I was forced to resort to such measures." Despite openly acknowledging that she had contemplated taking Driver's life for a considerable period, Ellie entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, a common legal defense strategy. Ultimately, the court found her guilty of the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter, a crime often associated with heightened emotional states. She received a sentence of 10 years of incarceration. However, this conviction was later overturned on appeal due to confirmed instances of juror misconduct, raising questions about the fairness of the initial trial. This resulted in her release after serving only a fraction of her sentence, a mere 3 years. However, the Nessler family's ordeals were far from over. As further legal troubles lay ahead, Ellie faced subsequent arrests for both the distribution and possession of methamphetamine, a dangerous controlled substance. These charges led to a 6-year prison sentence, marking another chapter in her ongoing legal battles. Simultaneously, her son, Willie, grappled with his own personal struggles and inner demons. In 2004, a violent outburst culminated in a fatal confrontation where he stomped a man to death in a fit of uncontrollable rage. Consequently, he received a sentence of 28 years to life imprisonment for the crime of first-degree murder, a charge indicating premeditation and intent. By June 2006, Ellie finally gained her freedom from incarceration, marking the end of her most recent prison term. However, due to a decline in her overall health, she was tragically unable to visit Willie while he remained behind bars. Adding to the family's sorrow, Ellie passed away at the relatively young age of 56, succumbing to a protracted battle with breast cancer 2 years later. However, in a surprising turn of events, Ellie was not the only mother who opted to pursue retribution through the legal system. The date is March 6, 1981. Inside a German courtroom, a scene of shocking and unexpected violence unfolds before the eyes of those present. Marianne Bachmeier, a 31-year-old mother driven by grief and rage, brandishes a pistol and discharges 8 rounds at Klaus Gruberowski, the individual accused of sexually assaulting and ultimately taking the life of her daughter, Anna. This act of vengeance, committed in the name of her slain child, would subsequently dominate headlines across the globe, sparking a heated and contentious public discourse on the complex interplay between justice and morality. But who was Marianne Bachmeier, the woman behind this extraordinary act? And what compelling circumstances ultimately led her to bypass established legal channels and take matters into her own hands? Marianne's life, as the investigation would reveal, was deeply marred by personal trauma and hardship. She herself had been a victim of sexual abuse, a deeply scarring experience that profoundly shaped her worldview. As a teenager, grappling with the emotional aftermath of her assault, she made the difficult decision to relinquish a child for adoption. After enduring yet another assault, shortly before the birth of her second child, a son, she once again opted to place the infant for adoption, a decision born out of difficult circumstances. But when she became pregnant with her third child, a daughter named Anna, Marianne was resolute in her determination to raise her daughter herself. For a period of time, Marianne and her daughter enjoyed a semblance of normalcy. They shared a seemingly happy life together in the quaint town of Lübeck, where Marianne was the proprietor of a popular local establishment. However, this tranquility was shattered on the fateful day of May 5, 1980, when their lives took an irreversible turn. The peaceful existence that Marianne had carefully cultivated for herself and her daughter was on the precipice of collapse following a heated domestic dispute with her mother. In the aftermath of the argument, young Anna made the impulsive decision to truant from school that day, unwittingly setting in motion a horrific sequence of events that would forever alter their lives. Tragically, Anna fell victim to a kidnapping orchestrated by Klaus Grabowski, a 35-year-old neighbor with a documented history of indecent exposure. A disturbing harbinger of the violence to come. After subjecting the young girl to hours of terrifying captivity, Grabowski committed the heinous act of strangling her to death using his fiancée's pantyhose as a weapon. In a further display of depravity, he then concealed Anna's lifeless body within a cardboard box, callously discarding it near a canal. Later that same evening, as suspicion mounted, Grabowski's fiancée, sensing something amiss, contacted law enforcement authorities, leading to a swift investigation. This ultimately resulted in Grabowski's apprehension and subsequent confession to the appalling crime. In a shocking twist, however, he vehemently denied any allegations of sexual assault, instead attempting to deflect blame onto the young victim by claiming that Anna had attempted to extort money from him. He further alleged that twisted and disturbing justification was profoundly unsettling. This outrageous and morally bankrupt excuse was akin to pouring gasoline on the already raging inferno of anguish and resentment that consumed Marianne's heart. And 1 year later, when Grabowski finally faced trial for the heinous crime of murdering Anna, Marianne was consumed by a profound sense that justice remained elusive and that true accountability was far from being realized. Consequently, on the third day of the court proceedings, she audaciously smuggled her Beretta 70 firearm into the Quebec District Court. Bypassing security measures, in a shocking act of vigilante justice, she shot Grabowski in the back, firing a total of 7 rounds, 6 of which found their mark, inflicting devastating injuries. The victim, Grabowski, succumbed to his wounds almost immediately. Following the shooting, Marianne calmly lowered her weapon, surrendering to authorities without offering any resistance. Eyewitnesses described her demeanor as remarkably composed yet resolute, with Judge Gunther Kroger later recounting her chillingly straightforward declaration. "My intention was to kill him. He took the life of my daughter. My desire was to shoot him in the face, but circumstances dictated that I shoot him in the back. I harbor the hope that he is deceased." As Marianne stood trial for the charge of murder, she divulged that she had repeatedly envisioned this very scenario in her dreams. This revelation came when a medical professional requested a sample of her handwriting for analysis. She penned a chilling message. "I did it for you, Anna," adorning the note with 7 distinct hearts, a poignant detail possibly symbolizing the precious years of her daughter's tragically short life. Furthermore, she vehemently denounced Grabowski's assertions, proclaiming, "I cannot believe the audacity of these continuous lies being fabricated about the victim. My own innocent child." Ultimately, after careful deliberation, the court rendered a verdict of guilty, convicting Marianne of premeditated manslaughter, a charge that reflected the gravity of her actions. The judge handed down a sentence of 6 years imprisonment, holding her accountable for the crime. However, in a controversial turn of events, she was granted release after completing only half of her mandated sentence. The saga of Marianne Bachmeier stands as a testament to profound loss and the agonizing pursuit of retribution fueled by a mother's grief. By September 17, 1996, Marianne Bachmeier's life had come to an end at the young age of 46. Succumbing to the weight of her experiences, she was subsequently laid to rest beside her beloved daughter, Anna, finding solace in eternal reunion. In the aftermath of this deeply complex case, a fundamental question lingers. How can society effectively grapple with the delicate balance between the pursuit of justice and the potentially destructive nature of vengeance?